70% of Americans have at least one chronic condition. Now, not all of those are debilitating, but the idea being that we need to start talking about caregiver fatigue and caregiver burnout because it's a problem.
Research and clinical work show that when chronic illness enters into a relationship, both partners end up grieving, even if they don't realize it. And it's not necessarily the illness itself that breaks relationships, but it's the unspoken grief and unhealthy conflict that follows. And I believe that even in these moments, faith calls us to something deeper, not to avoid the pain, but to grow through it, and to speak truth with love, and to choose commitment even when the road is hard. Welcome to the SwagAbility Show, where faith meets real life and where we believe that even in life's hardest seasons, growth, connection, and purpose are still possible. My guest today is Lisa Gray. Lisa is a psychotherapist with over 20 years of experience saving relationships and who specializes in couples counseling where there's chronic illness in either partner or both. She's also the author of 2 books, which I've had the pleasure of reading and digging through, Healthy Conflict, Happy Couple, and most recently, Thriving in a Relationship when you have a chronic illness. Lisa, I can't thank you enough, not only for giving me the material to read and prep, it was priceless, but for taking time out of your day to join us.
You're welcome. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but I've been excited about this episode because I think it's something that not a lot of people talk about, maybe behind closed doors, but when you live under 1,800 or 700 square feet of square footage, it can also look like a different picture. So I like to shed light into these situations and talk about stuff that we need to talk about. And so I appreciate your willingness to do that today. Before we get into the research and your books, do you mind telling us, you suffer with a chronic illness that you were diagnosed with. I'd never heard of it before. Do you mind sharing that with my listeners? Tell us a little bit about it and how that diagnosis affected your relationship in the early days.
Yeah, I really just, after I had my second child, I just felt like something wasn't right. I just couldn't get back to my healthy self. And all the symptoms were pretty vague, joint pain, but everybody kind of, you're not 20 anymore. Yeah. Fatigue, which is a huge part of a lot of chronic illnesses. And so like a lot of people with chronic illness, it took me years to get a diagnosis, and finally got a diagnosis of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disease. So basically our bodies don't make collagen or don't make enough collagen. And so we're able to, our knees and elbows will hyperextend and subluxate and those kinds of things. And so there's a real wide range. I have a pretty mild version with mostly fatigue, joint pain, malabsorption, things like that. But there are people who are completely disabled by this disease. So it's a Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And there's several different types. So there's a vascular type, which I think my brother had. And then there's a hypermobile type, and there's a couple other types as well. So, it's kind of a big, huge umbrella, but it covers a lot of ground.
I don't love diseases or illnesses, but I love shining light onto them because not that people need validating, but I think it explains that there are illnesses out there that maybe go unexplained or people just don't understand until we start to talk about them. And if you're open to it, when did you find that your diagnosis or even the feeling of it, the side effects of that come with it, how that had started to affect your relationship in the early days of either when you got a diagnosis or even before?
Yeah. Well, we used to be quite active. I would hike 5 times a week, and my husband and I would hike on the weekends and things like that. And then when you get fatigued and you get, there's a thing with this disease and with a lot of chronic illnesses called post-exertional malaise, which means that like if you overdo it, you'll have a crash. And so I can't do those hikes anymore that I used to do. And so it started to affect us in the sense that like I'm not going to be playing golf with him now. I'm not going to be going on that hike with him now. So like our interests started to diverge. And then also one thing that I tell all my clients, but that I also had to learn first, was this idea of energy management, which is that I only have so much energy and I have to decide what the best use of that energy is. And so, you know, a lot of my interests now are reading, puzzling, things that are done at home that don't require a ton of energy. And that's different than how I used to be. So thankfully I had a very understanding partner who doesn't mind, you know, contributing to the household stuff and going and playing golf with a friend instead of me. But I think it is a very difficult transition for people to make.
I was just thinking that as you were talking about it, especially for people that are used to being active. I think in my accident, it was instant. So there wasn't that slowly taking away from it.
Yeah.
And I often don't say one's more difficult than the other, but I would think that things you love to do that slowly get taken from you over time would be a real frustration. And I could see how that would overspill easily into relationships, especially tiredness, because that does all sorts of things to our bodies. But I want to spend the majority of our time. Well, first, before we talk about your books, you have 20 years in psychotherapy. Was that always an interest? What you come out of school with it, go back to school to take it?
No, I was really kind of a lost 20-year-old. You know, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I sort of fell into being an air traffic controller, which sounds
that would be
kind of weird,
amazing.
but yeah. So my husband is also an air traffic controller, so that's how we met each other. And then because that's a 24-hour cycle, when you have kids, it's just like really hard to have two air traffic controllers. And I had been part of a program, kind of a pilot program for the FAA, where we created a peer counseling program for controllers when there was an accident or like a bomb threat or anything that caused them extra stress. So I had been flying around the country, like kind of doing peer counseling for controllers when situations occurred. And so when I decided I wanted to stop doing that work because I had these two little kids at home, I just thought, well, I thought I would be a stay-at-home mom, and then I was really bad at that. So my husband said, well, you kind of like that counseling thing, and you could probably do that like in conjunction with being here with the kids most of the time and stuff like that. So I just went back to school to do it, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
May I ask another personal question? Is faith very much a part of who you are, your worldview? SwagAbility, faith is paramount. Our relationship with Christ, is that something that is paramount with you, your husband, your family?
Absolutely. Yeah. My husband grew up Catholic. So I would say institutional church is not as important to him. Yeah. But I've always had a faith community, and always a big important part of my life.
Let's talk about your books, because they clearly come from both your clinical work that you did and lived experience. You can tell that right away. What led you to write your first one, and what were you seeing or living that made you realize couples needed this kind of guidance?
Yeah, you know, it actually was a pandemic thing. It was like the pandemic hit and everyone had all these projects like sourdough or whatever the deal was. And I had extra time because I was at home, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like if I just kind of like did a brain dump and just like wrote down the things that I just say to people over and over again. Like, everyone thinks their relationship is so unique, but there are some things that I'm saying every single time with every single couple, you know, and what if I wrote that down so that more couples could be exposed to that information? And then that turned into my first book. Yeah.
Yeah. You write in your book there, the chronic illness creates grief for both partners, even when neither name it as grief. what does that actually, what that grief that you speak of, what does that actually look like in real life between couples? If you could give us an example.
Yeah. Well, I think that it is really important actually to name it as grief, because if once you name it as grief, I think we all understand that people grieve differently and that we might be in different places in our grief. We might be grieving in different ways, and it helps us, just framing it that way, I feel like helps us look at our partners with a little bit more empathy for their experience. And also, I think that chronic illness, it's understandable to people that the sick person would be grieving because they've lost their health. But it's not always intuitive to people that the other partner is also grieving because they had a vision of what this relationship was going to be like and what their life was going to be like, and now it's not like that. So I would say an example just would be that, like, maybe one person, maybe the sick person is quite depressed, like they're in a depressive grieving place with their chronic illness, and maybe they're not motivated to go look for cures or whatever that is, and maybe their partner's kind of in an angry place and they're like, what's wrong with you, why aren't you doing something? Or the sick partner's pursuing a million TikTok cures that they've seen, and the well partner is like, we can't afford this. So there's a lot of conflict that goes on, and then just the tons of renegotiation on stuff like household
Yeah.
duties and roles and all of that.
My wife and I talk at length. I mean, it's not one conversation. It's many, and it's repeated because sometimes we forget it again, or I don't stop being disabled, right? It's not I hear and count. It's my life, and vice versa. And I don't think my eyes were opened up to it until my wife's recent cancer battles, like her operation she went through. And I found myself on the other side of the bed for the first time in our relationship, realizing how helpless I was to cure. I had to trust my wife to someone else's care, ultimately the Lord's, but still care to get better. And where I'm usually on the other side in the bed, receiving some sort of attention that's going to get relief. As the caregiver, I didn't have that relief. And for the first time, the light went off that, wow, like a lifetime commitment. It's not just the, honey, can you do this? It's the actual realization that her frustration a lot of the time is, I can't fix this. And even though my anger, sometimes I'm the grounding rod for it, it's not at the Stephen, it's at the C5 quadriplegic part of it. Is that normal in couples that you speak with?
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of helplessness. I just have a huge heart for the caregiver part of the dyad, because I feel like they don't get enough empathy and like acknowledgement for what they're doing. And oftentimes they have so much guilt that they don't go out and take care of themselves, even though they really should. But they feel like, oh, I need to be here for this person. And I think like you and your wife are on the right track in terms of having many, many conversations about it. Like when one of you is chronically ill, you have to have so much more communication than you could have ever imagined you would need to have, and a lot of conversations where it's just okay to express how you feel without your partner feeling like they need to fix it, and understanding that you actually are doing something when you just listen to your partner. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you really are.
Yeah. It's funny, there's so many conversations going through my head as we talk about it that I could just unpack here, but I want to keep moving on for time's sake. You make a powerful distinction when you say acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means learning how to move forward differently. What do you mean by that? And can you explain the differences between what acceptance and kind of resignation and what acceptance looks like inside the relationship instead?
Yeah. I think acceptance is a really hard word for a lot of people because, I mean, let's face it, this is unacceptable. I mean, you should not be in the situation that you're in. Like, I should not have a chronic illness. It's not acceptable. We live in a fallen world, right? So there's a resistance to the word. But like when I talk about stages of grief, like going through anger or depression or all of those things, like acceptance is just a stage like any other. It's not meant to be like a final landing point where you're going to reach some pinnacle and then be there forever. It's like a bird landing on a branch. It's like once in a while you reach this moment where it's like, you know, this is where I'm at right now. I'm okay with that. And it's a little bit of a skill to let yourself just rest there. And sometimes if you're there and your partner's not, it can look like you're giving up. And partners don't like to see that, you know, but it's not a dangerous thing to do. It's just a resting place. That's all. And resting is important. And so, you know, I don't look at acceptance as giving up. I look at it like being in agreement with the reality of the moment that you're in. You know, it's like I love this quote that says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. You know, it's like this is where we're at right now. We might be someplace different later. Science is always moving forward or whatever, but right now we're right here. And that kind of acceptance, this moment is the only moment you can affect change from. So if we can't accept that we're here, then we can't actually make any changes.
One of the things that I often say, and it can be it works sometimes, but also super frustrating at other times, is it is what it is. But that's a hard one to sometimes hear because it sounds like resignation or it sounds like a giving up. But the reality, it is what it is. And I had to come to grips with that personally, that I can't fix myself either. If I have anxiety about that, it is what it is. What are your thoughts on this? I've often said when I've talked to couples in the pastoral mode, I've said that I believe caregiver burnout is what mental health was probably 20, 25 years ago. It wasn't kind of acceptable to talk about. It's a closet sickness, if you will, and that now we can freely accept that as a diagnosis. Where caregiver burnout or caregiver fatigue, it's almost a guilty thing because who gives up on a disabled partner or who gives up on that? It's just, but the reality is, in a marriage, till death do you part, that is what it is. Do you see that in your practice, that talking about it in public or admitting that sometimes you absolutely resent, it ends up being pointed at the person or other family members? Is that prevalent?
Yeah. I mean, we're at this point where like 70% of Americans have at least one chronic condition. Now, not all of those are debilitating, but the idea being that we need to start talking about caregiver fatigue and caregiver burnout because it's a problem. And I think that, you know, like I always think of trying to externalize the illness. It's like a third person in your relationship. So you can direct your resentment or your anger or whatever at the illness, not at your partner. You know, it's like you can still be resentful and angry, but just not directing it at your partner. Like you said, you can direct it towards the unfairness of the situation or the illness or whatever. But preventing burnout in general, not just caregiver burnout, but any kind of burnout is like not something that you do in a moment, like, oh, I'm burned out now, I need to relieve that. It's a daily practice of taking care of yourself from the beginning. You know, and so it's not just the caregiver that needs to be committed to that, but it's also the sick partner that needs to be committed to that. Like, I need to let my husband go on that hike with somebody else and feel happy for him about it, because that's what he needs to do in order to stay committed to this relationship and be healthy. And I just think that's overlooked so often.
I'll be honest with you, we're 26 years married. and then dating years, so around 30 years together. It wasn't up until I would say the last 2 years where I came to an acceptance, complete acceptance, that to see Julie go off to her sisters or to her parents, to wherever, church events, whatever, when I couldn't make it, didn't it didn't frustrate me, anger me, give me sorrow. I was at peace with what it is, and vice versa. Even though Julie goes away, she needs it. And so say to her sisters, she says she still has a hard time turning off that caregiver hat, even when you're, 20 or 30 hours away from that person. So I think it's for both parties. In your work dealing with couples, tell me how the male and female role, tell me how each of them view things different. What do you notice difference from the male and female perspective? Because the statistic I read was like 6 to 7 times higher that if a woman gets sick, the man won't leave, whereas it's like a 2% the other way. When the man gets sick, the woman is faithful to stay. What do you see between male and female when it comes to this relationship of working through conflict?
Well, this can be a stereotypical, way to look at it, but stereotypes are there for usually some sort of a statistical reason. Yeah. So I think that women in our culture are just more geared towards caregiving in general. So it's sort of like most of the couples that I see when they have kids, for example, it's the wife who's thinking, should I stay home? Should I work? How am I going to meet that? Like there's still in our culture, like the man's like, I'm going to go back to work and be the provider and all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily like an inner turmoil about should I stay home or not. So it's kind of built into like our female and, soul, like that I'm here to kind of like be the caretaker of everyone. So I think like when your partner gets sick and you're a woman, it's not, especially if you have kids, it's not that different than what you're already doing in your life. You're baking casseroles for people and taking care of your kids and now taking care of your partner. Whereas I think it's a real paradigm shift for a male partner when their wife gets sick, because first of all, they do have to continue to be the breadwinner, the provider, maybe even more so now if their wife was working before. And also they have to do household things they never had to do before, caregiving things they never had to do before. It's quite a burden that's unexpected and that I feel like we have not socialized and trained them to be.
I can just see the comment section blowing up. But the reality is, it's the truth. I believe in God-defined roles, the biblical role for. So I don't think it's old-fashioned. I think it's ingrained very much into the DNA of who we are, women caring for children, and they have that caring part to them. I marvel at my wife, especially early on when I was 19 and fresh when we got into a relationship. It was 3 years. She was asking me, when are you going to ask me to marry you? But I just was taking that time because I couldn't fathom in my head, to me, someone giving up their life for not, but she didn't see this as, she saw a person differently. Yeah. Now, we don't have the fairy tale, picturesque relationship, but we have the normal relationship like every other husband and wife has. But I want to talk about when you're talking about conflict. You say conflict itself isn't the problem. It's how couples engage in it. So I guess twofold. What does healthy conflict actually look like, especially when couples are already under the stress of a chronic illness? What does healthy conflict look like in that?
Yeah, so, first of all, with conflict, it's like I mean, our relationships are the most important things in our lives, but nobody ever taught us how to do conflict. Like, we don't get a class in high school on how to do conflict or anything. So most of us are just mimicking what we saw our parents or caretakers do, or we've developed a style based on the conflicts that we have had throughout our life, for better or for worse, you know. And so one of the biggest issues that I see, like, if I could only give one piece of advice for the rest of my life, it would be like, most couples only argue when they're already mad. So it's like, you know, if I ask any couple on the street, what are the things you argue about? They know. It's not like we don't know, like, what our issues are. It's just that, like, why would I bring that up on a perfectly good Saturday morning when, like, nothing's going on, right? So I wait until something triggers that, until my partner does that thing that makes me really mad, but then I'm already mad. So the likelihood of us having a productive conversation at that point, when I'm probably not starting in a great tone and it's critical and all of those things, it's just not going to work out. So I have couples come to see me and they go, well, we've been having the same argument for 10 years. And my very first question is, how often have you talked about it when you're not already mad? And the answer is often like never. So I think healthy conflict means the ability to recognize that there's an issue where you're not the same person and you have an ongoing difference about something, and the willingness to sit down and talk about that in a reasonable way when you're not already mad. Try to come up with creative problem-solving solutions for it. But if you only talk about it when you're already mad, you're never going to get there. You're literally disconnected from the creative problem-solving part of your brain.
Maybe for those couples who are listening right now and they're realizing that they've been carrying a lot of these unnamed things, what's one small step that they can take this week or today to begin changing how they communicate about these things that they're now able to name?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing I would say is that most of the time when my couples sit down to to communicate, they're problem solving. You know, they're like, they have an idea of like what they want to happen and they go straight into problem solving without really having conversations just about curiosity. Like, what is your experience? You know what I mean? What are your longings? What makes you sad today? What do you feel guilty about? You know, I just want to know you better. And so I would say, like, any couple can sit down more often and have these conversations of just like truly wanting to know what your partner's inner world is like. What is their experience? You're not trying to solve anything or change anything or any of that. You're just like, we have these conversations when we're dating, you know, like, what's your favorite color? What's your, whatever. And we stop having them when we get married. I'm not sure why, but, you know, curiosity is your best friend. And so just like being able to sit down and have a fun conversation with your partner, like really just get curious, be like a scientist, like try to figure out what makes them tick. Those conversations, it's like a bank account. Those are deposits into your account, and you need those to balance out all the withdrawals that life just naturally brings you, you know.
I don't think you probably see a lot of people that coming to because of the amount of over communication they're having, right? Over communication is never the issue.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it personally from that perspective. How do you help couples redefine strength and commitment when life doesn't return to what it used to be after chronic illness or after disability comes into life, and it's not going to go back to what it was? That redefining, how do you help couples work through that?
Yeah, it's interesting because most of us, when we got married, we made vows with the understanding that life would change, right? We said in sickness and in health and, you know, all those things, but we didn't think it was going to really happen to us, you know? Right. So I think the way that I work with couples a lot on this is what I was talking about with values, is like helping them to really hone in on what are your values as an individual, what are your values as a couple. Like if someone saw you crossing the street and they go, that couple is so amazing because they what? Like, what are your values? What do you want people to see in you? And then this is how you used to convey that to the world. Now there's a sickness. It's not going to go back to that, but you don't have to lose that value system. So how can we adjust how you live your lives every day so that you can still look back on your marriage and your life and be like, we accomplished that value that we had. I mean, the sickness doesn't need to redefine those values for you. It'll redefine your activities, but it doesn't need to redefine your values.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Looking back, I mean, you've got 20 years of experience in this. When couples come to you, especially illness being a major part of that, what 2 or 3 common patterns or common complaints do you see prevalent, like over the years you've done it? Maybe 3. I'm sure there's a handful, but what are the common ones that you often hear? And then we'll talk about how we can dismantle a couple of those.
Yeah. So the first one I think I already talked about, which is like people just arguing only when they're mad.
Yes.
So just teaching that one thing can be a huge game changer. The other thing I see a lot is like a me against you kind of mindset, and changing that into an us against the problem mindset. So it's sort of like, that winning thing you were talking
Yes.
about earlier. It's like you are my problem, right? But what if like the illness is your problem and you're a team trying to figure out the illness, or the housework is your problem and you're a team trying to figure out the housework? Like, make the problem the problem. Don't make each other the problem, And then the third one I would say, which we just talked about, was just like the lack of positive, curious communication. Like we just get into schedules and bills and logistics and all of that stuff, and we just stop having fun together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along these same lines, let's talk to, first of all, the couple right now that we call them interabled couples, but one with an illness, one with life, and just starting their life journey together now. Maybe it's marriage or dating. What advice would you, first of all, give to this young couple when it comes to having a successful, fulfilling journey together? It's not a matter of just tying the knot and being dragged either way, but I would say fulfilled, joyful. It doesn't mean without conflict, but a fulfilled life. Give them, two set of advices, and then we'll go to the opposite extreme.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I would say is don't feel like you've settled for something that's second best. Like, what's interesting is that most of my couples have been living their lives completely unintentionally. And one of the things when you are an interabled couples is that you have to live your life very intentionally. And that's why I actually chose the word thriving on my title of my book, is because many of my couples where one person has some sort of an illness or disability have actually richer relationships than my couples that don't have any big issues in their life, because they have to live so much more intentionally. So your life is the same adventure that we all get, and you don't have to accept less than just because one of you has some sort of a disability or an illness. Like, with intention, you can have just as rich of a relationship and life as anyone else. It might look different, but that's, not a problem. So I think just having this hope and understanding that this doesn't need to necessarily be a negative for your relationship. Yeah.
That's great. I know my wife is fine with this. We talk about it often. And one of the things that attracted us to contacting you was that word thriving, because at SwagAbility, our tagline has always been thrive wherever life finds you. If you've got air in your lungs today, you have the ability to thrive in life. It may look completely different, but thriving is Thriving is optional.
Yes.
It's a conscious choice you make despite what's going on. We came to after Julie's cancer surgeries, and I had just come from 7 months, or vice versa. I was 7 months in the hospital, coming home, and she's in a brand new body now because of those things, and I've now been 7 months, so my health was not what it was, almost unrecognizable when I went in. And I'll be the first to admit, as a pastor, I did not want to go to couples counseling. I thought, why do pastors need counseling? We can deal with it ourselves. But I think every couple, whether they're pastor or whatever industry they're in or whatever they think, I think every couple could benefit from couples counseling. It doesn't mean I think we've got to lose the stigma that you're less of a relationship or less of that. I think it just gives you an opportunity to have a neutral individual check in that can hold both accountable and ask honest questions. So I apologized after two sessions. I'm used to podcasting, 2 sessions of counseling, because in hindsight, that was the richest time we had and was the most benefit. It saved our marriage, and I am forever grateful for that lady, and the fact that we accepted it. So to the opposite end, to the couple that is feeling stuck in a relationship, whether it's their biblical worldview that they say we can't divorce, so we're stuck now, or whether it's the principle we're living with one another and it just is what it is. What advice would you give them to help them out of the word stuck? Because quite often that's just what you could feel like, and what I did feel like we both felt. We were stuck in this thing. What do we do with it? People looking on, and it was just stuck. What advice do you give those people today that recognize that and need to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with you. It's like, as couples therapists, for sure, we wish people would come in sooner. It's like when the current statistic, I think, is like couples wait 6 years after they know that there's a problem to come in. And like, I can't solve that for them. Like, there's so many resentments and bad behavior that's built up over those 6 years, And it's like, what I tell people is like, we go to the dentist every 6 months and your relationship hopefully is way more important and dynamic than your teeth. So it's not like you have to go to therapy every single week, but like make a relationship with a couples therapist, solve whatever's going on now, and then you can do like checkups just like you do at the dentist or whatever. I have tons of couples who come to me a couple times a year just to check in. And so, it is very valuable to have someone who is outside of your situation looking in to say, hey, what if you do this or what if you do that? And I tell my kids too, it's like, there was a point in time probably where as therapists, we were just kind of guessing about what maybe would help people. That's not the case now. We have the information, like it's out there. So even if you just are totally opposed to counseling for whatever reason, like pick up some of the great books that are out there. I mean, like just the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work is like the industry standard. My book on conflict.
Who's that by?
That's by John Gottman.
Okay, because your two are for sure. They're on top of my list. But I was going to ask, outside of yours, what other material or tools are out there for? Because I couldn't agree with you more. We've invested a lifetime together. Whether you some have children together, finance, everything. We've invested that in it together. So why wouldn't we nurture that means together? And I'm as guilty as anyone else of getting busy, podcast schedule, whatever, of ignoring it and having to go eat humble pie. But it's such a great reminder that relationships, we're the species, the only things on earth that have the ability to reason with one another, to talk it through. to have that intimacy, and it's such a gift, but there's such a stigma attached to helping problem solve the biggest gift that we've been given.
Yeah. I just read a book called The Marriage Habit. It just came out. I thought it was fantastic. And those authors have a podcast and social medias on Marriage 365 is their kind of tag. So, you know, there's podcasts, there's books, there's marriage retreats. So like, even if you feel like you can't like put the time in day to day, you know, like going on a 3 or 4 day marriage retreat with focus on the family, or like John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, like he runs retreats that a couple of my clients have gone to and really enjoyed. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but it takes intentionality. Like your marriage is never going to be great if you're just coasting along hoping somehow it's going to be great.
Do you do therapy virtual? And if so,
I do.
Give me your website or how to contact you once more.
Yeah. So my website is lisagraymft.com. And unfortunately, with my license, we can only do state by state. So I can see clients anywhere in California. I have a team of therapists who work for me that can do that. There's also a great directory at chronicillnesstherapists.com/directory. So if you're outside of California, that's a great place to find a good therapist. My books you can find at lisagrayauthor.com. And then I'm at Instagram at lisagraymft.
Okay, MFT.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for this. I think you should have a podcast. But I know that time is not everything that we all have, but you just have some valuable information, and I see it in, well, not only in my life, but as a pastor, there's just such a need, and there's relationships could be so much better if we learn to, I think, a couple things, not coast, but to identify what you said, identify conflict for what it is. It's not the person. It's for us, it's a chronic illness, not the person. And there's so much more could be said. Lisa, thank you for
You're welcome.
The episode, and I appreciate your friendship as well. Folks, if this episode has inspired you, or you know of a couple, would you do my wife and I the greatest favor? Would you share it with someone that might be in need? These conversations matter so much. The second thing you could do for us that would mean the world for us, if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, and whatever podcast platform is your favorite, would you check out our shows? We have a new one coming out, Interrupted by Adversity, which we're looking forward to launching, as well as a daily show that will be a 5-minute Bible application called the Spiritually Starved Podcast. And you can also head over to SwagAbility.com and sign up for our newsletter. Our desire is to support individuals who are going through trauma, illness, and disability, along with caregivers, the unsung heroes who are often dealing with burnout. Until next time, keep thriving where you are, and we will see you on the next show. I'm excited about it because it deals with something very similar, and her name is Stephanie Bond. We'll be speaking with next week, and until that time, keep thriving, and swags out.